Good morning. I'm Sheila. As Bert said, I was going to get up later, so here I am. Thank you, Lucas and Karina, not just their words, but their life of generosity and purpose. Just to be clear, we're not saying you shouldn't own a TV or you have to do that. Bert and I own more than one TV. You understand that was not the point, or here's the point. And it's this: when it comes to money, to greed, to stewardship, to spending, to generosity, to contentment, you need to know what you need to do to guard your heart. Every one of us, I need to know what I need to do to guard my heart. The writer of Proverbs, the book of wisdom in the Bible, he said, above all else, guard your heart, because everything of life flows out of that. So if you want to live that life of simplicity and generosity, you need to know how to guard your heart. That was an aside. We are doing this series, Money Matters. And money is a heart matter. We started out week one, Rich talked about matters of the heart, and he was talking about, as we've prepared this sermon series, we've looked and we've said, this is an opportunity for each of us to look honestly at our own heart. And isn't it easy to slip into believing that life is about financial status or possessions? And we're taking a little pause in what is one of the most expensive times of the year, coming into Christmas, to reflect on what's important and the position of our heart. Money matters. Jesus put it pretty simply: you can't serve God and money. A couple weeks ago, Bert talked about stewardship, and he asked us what we did with what God placed in our hands. What are you doing with the possessions you have, with the money you have, the things that God put in your hand? And what we do with what we have in our hands really reflects on what we believe, or it's directly reflected on our view of God. So do we believe that everything I have, do I believe everything I have comes from Him and belongs to Him? Or do I believe that God is good and the good Father who gives unto me? Or do I believe He's hard and harsh and demanding? And when it comes to stewardship, to managing what we have, it's revealed not in your ideas or your thoughts, but it's revealed in your actions. Last week, Rich talked about greed. Greed has a tremendous power over us. Money has a tremendous power over us because we're often blind to it. Oh, nobody is going to stand up and say, here I am. Put up your hand if you're greedy. Well, we really probably should all put up our hands, but we're often blinded to it. Here's a little test. When you're on that slippery slope, if I only had, fill in the blank, my heart's longing would be satisfied. What do you want that you don't have, that you think that if you had it, the longing of your heart would be satisfied? Next week, we're going to talk about giving. We're going to cap this series off with giving, because when we work on all the other things in our heart, that helps us get to that place of actually just being able to obey God with our finances. Starting with the tithe, He calls us to give 10% off the top. And no matter what my expenses are, or the size of my paycheck, or the city that I live in, we're to honor God with the first fruits of our wealth. And I just keep thinking about Jesus saying, hey guys, don't call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say. Which brings me to contentment, because I'm not really sure you can come to a place of contentment if you haven't wrestled through all those other things in your life. And continually, because contentment is not one and done. When I saw the 5 titles for this sermon series, within a couple minutes I sent a text to Rich and I said, can I do contentment? Not because I think I've arrived, but because I know I'm not there yet. I've been a believer in Jesus for a really long time. And I can say that position of contentment is something where you have to keep returning to it. all returning to it. What's rattling me right now? What's taking me away from that? So I'm excited to talk about contentment, and I was excited to read a whole lot about it this week in preparation. So, yeah, you know, I'm going to say every time, but it's probably every time. The New Testament uses the word content or contentment. It's always talking about money. So when we're doing a Money Matters series, it's a really important word in that. Of course, when you're preparing a sermon, you always start out with Google, right? Not really. But I did Google, because it's fun, what does contentment mean in the Bible? And here's what AI told me. In the Bible, contentment is a way of living that involves trusting in God's goodness and resting in his wisdom and strength. It's not a feeling, but rather an action and a surrender. Contentment can be experienced even when the basic needs and wants are lacking. There's your AI overview. Well, actually, we're going to turn to the Bible today, and we are going to read some of Paul's letter to Timothy. Now, Paul wrote a whole bunch of the New Testament in the form of letters to various people and churches, and when he writes to Timothy, he considers Timothy a son. Now, I have 4 kids, and I know that as a parent, you want to tell your kids the most important things in life, from the time they're little to even now when our kids are almost all in their 30s. You want to tell your kids the most important things in life. So I love Paul's letter to Timothy because I think it's some of the best that Paul has to tell us. So here we go. The 6th chapter, beginning with the 6th verse. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. That's not good news, is it? He goes on, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not money itself, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Before we go on, remember, this isn't about the person sitting beside you. It's not about the other guy. Jesus said to all of us, beware, guard your heart against all forms of greed, because there's lots of them. Let's keep reading. Verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Now that sounds good. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, listen to this because it sounds a little bit about like Jesus himself. In this way, they will treasure up for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. What did Jesus say? Not build your treasures here, but set your treasures in a place that's eternal. So, we're going to look at 5 words from this passage, and the first word we're going to look at is the word trap. Because Paul wrote, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap. And those who are rich mustn't put their hope in wealth. I think to be, as people of God, to be the people God wants us to be, we need to recognize that money can be a trap. And that pursuit of riches and that love of money can be a trap. We see the warnings of the spiritual danger of money, that people can walk away from their faith when their eyes are on riches. We see the warnings of danger in money. if you have an inordinate desire for possessions and money, it's a trap. It can be a trap. And what's the thing about a trap? You know, the little bunny rabbit, he's hopping along, and he gets, I don't know what you call those traps, snares. The thing about a snare or a trap is that you don't see it until you're already caught in it. Beware. Stay on guard. Money can be a trap. If you're stuck on getting rich, it can be a temptation and a trap. And Paul addresses people on both sides of the financial world. He warns those who don't have money and want to get rich that they might fall into temptation, but he also says to those who are rich that you don't become arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth, because it can disappear. So what drives us to put our hope in money? I think sometimes it's fear and a wrong view of God. A few weeks ago, we looked at the parable of the talents and the guy who just buried his stuff away. The first thing he said was, I knew, to the master, who was kind of the picture of God, I knew you to be a hard man. Do you think of God as a hard man, or do you think of God as the good, good Father from whom all blessings come? A wrong view of God, fear. Maybe it's ego and pride. Oh man, I just need to prove myself, and I'm going to make it to the top, and I'm going to take every promotion. And there might be somebody in mind that you're proving yourself to, a friend, a brother, an uncle, a father, or you're maybe trying to prove yourself to yourself. Maybe it's family pressure. Hey, I paid for you to go to university, so now you better accomplish this or that. Family pressure is huge in the area of finances and money. Wow. And yet Paul warns Timothy, if your heart is set on the pursuit of money, your future could be ruin and grief and destruction. That's not a good news story. Remember from last week, Jesus said, watch out, beware. Guard yourself against all types of greed, because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So money and possessions can kind of mess up our life, poison our life, either with its absence or with its presence. When we pursue or when we rest on wealth being the answer to everything in life. The next word is the word gain. Paul wrote to Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness. Godliness is a heart thing. It's your heart in the right place. It's your devotion to God. With contentment is great gain. And yet he wrote, some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Jesus said, whoever wants to save their own life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for his sake will save it. And then he says, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul or forfeit her soul? The Bible has a lot of positive things to say about money and things and possessions. In fact, we read the encouragement to the rich to put your hope in God, who richly provides us everything for our enjoyment. Everything for our enjoyment. I remember that Abraham, in the book of Genesis, God says, I'm going to bless you. Yeah, I'm going to bless you, and he did. But I'm going to bless you to be a blessing. Jesus said to his followers, he says, I came that you might have life and really have it abundantly. That's a really nice word. I like the word abundantly. I like that hope to have everything that I need and lots of it. Talents. From a couple of weeks ago, the guy who had 5 bags of gold. He worked hard and he gained. It actually says he gained 5 more. And the master didn't say, oh, you naughty guy, you made some money. No. The gain is also gain and provision, money. There's a lot of positive things that that God says He's going to look after us. I don't know if there's another way to say it. He's a good Father, and if you ask of Him, He's going to provide for you. Godliness with contentment is great gain, but your eyes and your heart that need to be focused on Him, not on the things, right? Not on the wealth and the stuff. The other thing is, if you're not in that place of godliness and contentment as that spot of gain, you might do, let me think of a word. You might be willing to compromise for the sake of gain. In other words, you might do things that are skirting the lines of moral or skirting the lines of legal, or to get yourself into a little better place. Maybe you twist something on your resume, or maybe that this is, it's legal, but is it? I don't know. So here, I don't know how to explain this other than telling you a story. And I think it'll make sense to you. Bert and I needed to replace a car. It had like more kilometers on than I can count, and it was on its last leg. So we were looking for a used car, and we got a car that's new to us. It's not new, but it was new to us. And it was a private sale, so we purchased it from an individual, and there's paperwork you have to sign out. And we noticed that he had put the purchase price on the paperwork less than what we paid him for the car. And he was trying to do us a favor, because when you go into Service Ontario, you pay your GST. If you ever bought a car in Ontario, you pay your GST on that figure. And Bert and I went, but that's not what we paid for the car. And he's like, well, they'll never know. He was trying to do Bert and I a favor. Now, As a brother. Oh, I forgot that part. Because he was a believer. And he was a believer. And he was trying to do us a favor. It gets worse, doesn't it? And we went back and we put in the amount that we paid the man for the car, and we paid the GST that we knew before God and man we owed the provincial and federal government. And he was shocked. Now, if Bert and I were just seeking gain, nobody would have known. Bert and I and the guy we bought the car from, if we were just seeking gain, we'd have signed our name on that legal document and lied and paid this amount of GST instead of that amount of GST and had a little more in our pocket. So, gain in itself, growth and increase, not a bad thing. Gain by illegitimate needs might shows us our heart perhaps is not in the right place. You get it. Desires. Our next word is desires. Those who want to get rich fall into foolish and harmful desires. So that harmful desires, harmful means what you think harmful is going to mean. Hurtful, injurious. That word desires, someplace it's translated lust. But it's not lust like when I say the word lust, I know what you all think about. It's not that. That's not the word. We distort the meaning of this because we think wrong. There is a place where it says angels, and it has this word, epithemia, the Greek word, whether I said that right, after God. Well, that's angels lusting after, the word actually means not just a desire for something, but an over-desire, an inordinate desire. An eagerness for something beyond, inordinate, the desire for something that, not a bad thing. In fact, let me just go off on this a little bit more. That desire is not a desire for bad things. It's a desire usually for things that are good. So a desire for food is good, but if you have an over-desire for good, you might struggle with some kind of eating disorder, or if a desire for physical relationship between man and wife, it's a good thing. But if that's a perverted desire, then you do things you shouldn't do. Or what else is a good thing? You can think about them. In themselves, they're not bad. But when we have an over desire for something, it puts us once again on that slippery slope. Last week we talked about greed, some other words, covetousness. The 10th commandment, there were 10 commandments God gave Moses, starting with don't have any other gods before me. But the final one was don't covet. Don't covet just means you have it and I don't have it and I'd really like to have it. It's kind of being envious and those other things like stealing and lying and you don't do those things unless there's something you want and you use an illegitimate means to get it. That's what coveting is. So greed and covetousness, those harmful desires, what our heart is attracted to, where we might say, if only I had this, then I'd be happy. Or if ever I lost this, my life would have no meaning. What our identity comes from. I have a funny story now. It wasn't particularly funny it was a little funny at the time. Our daughter, who's no longer 13, but she was 13 at one point in her life, we would send her to the church youth camp. So she comes home from camp and I say, what did you learn at camp? And she goes, I learned about branded clothing. Okay. Wasn't what I was expecting to hear. So she had been rooming with a young lady who was a little bit older than her. Catherine was 13 and this girl was 15. And this girl came from, honestly, one of the wealthiest families in our church. And so she knew all about branded clothing. Now, we had branded clothing, Old Navy and George and The Gap. This girl had Prada, Chanel, and Gucci, right? It wasn't... So Catherine came home super happy because she had learned about branded clothing. Now, when you're 13 and you think that your identity might be found in what you wear, that's not uncommon for a 13-year-old girl. It's just part of growing up. It's sorting through some things in life. But if you're 30... and you still think your significance, your status is in what you wear, it's in the shoes you own. Oh, won't somebody notice me because I have this handbag or I have these fancy, I don't know what kind of shoes men wear, but those basketball shoes things. I was trying to not just be about the women things, though the guys usually just do the guy thing, so I guess I can. When you're a teenager and you're sorting through what's important in life, to think that if I just had branded clothing, my identity would be secure. But if your identity is still wrapped up at 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 in what you have as a symbol of your status, then you probably have a problem. So, you know what it does? It actually poisons your ability to appreciate the things you do have. If you live in that place of envy, then I see something you have and it's better than what I have, and all of a sudden I'm not content with something I was perfectly content with until I started to compare myself. It hinders your ability to be grateful, whether it's your job, your body, your looks, your house, your car, your clothing. When you compare, when you envy, when you covet, they can be harmful desires that actually put a separation between you and God, and you're not content with what you have. Coveting, envy, greed, idolatry, what besides God has taken that kind of functional place in my life for my security and my significance? Well, learning contentment. Paul wrote to Timothy, if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Paul said in the book of Philippians, writing the letter he wrote to the Philippian church, he said, I've learned the secret of being content. What will bring me contentment right now? The right school, the right job, the right career, the right look, the right partner. I do have kids, I don't have kids. I'm wearing the right clothes. You get it. Paul said he'd learned something in life. In fact, he said he learned it whether he had or whether he didn't have. He learned contentment over his life. When way back in the 1990s, Bert and I bought our first house. And it was a stretch to get into a house. And I was so happy and I was so grateful and I really liked it. And there was space. It wasn't huge, but there was space for our 3 kids. And then we went to visit some people. And we had a bungalow and they had a 2-story. And we had, it was furnished, but it was furnished. And theirs looked like it could have been in a magazine. And you know what happened in my heart? It's all of a sudden that gratitude that I had. I lost my contentment for the thing that I did have. I remember driving. We lived in Calgary, and I loved Calgary. I didn't ever want to leave Calgary at that time. I loved Calgary. And I remember driving one day and just saying to the Lord, I'm really grateful for where we live, being so close to the Rocky Mountains, and just it's spectacular. And thank you for the privilege of living in Calgary. But if ever you would call me to move on, let me never hold on more tightly to something you have given me than what you would want me to. Or else, you know what happens? You can't ever let go. It was a really nice prayer. And then the time came where we were supposed to move. And then the reality of that, of the posture of my heart, is tested, right? Okay, you didn't want to hold on more tightly than you should, and now it's time to let go. So we moved, and we went from our cutesy little house to living with our kids in an apartment in Nashville. And that year, we moved there in September, and at Christmas, we went. But, it was kind of peaceful. I felt like we were where God wanted us to be, and we made this little apartment our home. And then at Christmas, we got invited to somebody's house. And once again, you think somewhere along the line I would have settled this in my heart. But once again, this house was HGTV worthy. It was so beautiful. We've gone from magazines in the 90s to HGTV by whatever year this was. And again, that thing in my heart, that goes, I was feeling content. We were where we were supposed to be. And then I saw something somebody else had, and that ache within me. We were living in an apartment with hand-me-down furniture, and it was red and green Christmas colors, the sofa and the love seat. Oh, it was not pretty. But I learned a bit about contentment. I was learning. Paul said he learned the secret of contentment. It wasn't one and done. You get into another circumstance and situation, and you think that thing that was gone and is back again. Unless you think I have this contentment thing figured out, I'm really quite happy in the house I'm living in right now. I don't. But there's lots of other areas where discontent can come in, and where comparison can come in, and envy, and some desires that might be helpful at this stage in life. It's probably not your house or your shoes or your clothes, but maybe it's your retirement savings or the vacations you get to go on at our age. There's always a place where we can be content. We think we're content with what we have. And then there's that temptation to look, but there could be more. So lest you think that I have this all figured out, I don't. It's life's journey. Paul wrote this. I've learned to be content, he said. I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned, I've lost my spot. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him, through Christ who gives me strength. So contentment, that settledness in any and every circumstance, inner peace that's not dependent on what you have or what you don't have. Paul learned to be content. And it doesn't mean you're not believing or hoping for things. You're not trusting that something's going to get better. You're not hoping for resolution where there's brokenness in your life. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to work hard. It doesn't mean that you're not supposed to, do the best in your schoolwork. And, no, I'm just content. No. It doesn't mean there's no hope for change in your life. Quite the opposite. Work hard. Be courageous, be hopeful, build your life, but build it on a proper foundation of trust and confidence in him. We read at the end of that portion from 1 Timothy, so that it says, but we, you, may, us, may take hold of the life that is truly life. The book of Proverbs, this is such an interesting proverb as we draw to an end. 2 things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I might have too much and disown you, the rich guy who is leaning in his wealth, or say, who is the Lord, or I may become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of God. So the wisdom of the writer of Proverbs said, don't give me either, because I see temptation on either end of this. Don't give me too little that I would turn and curse you, but don't give me too much that I would forget about you. Finally, enjoyment. Put your hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Be rich in good deeds, generous, willing to share, take hold of life that is truly life. Paul said we brought nothing into the world, we'll take nothing out of it. He's remembering something that was written in the book of Job. Naked, without possessions, I came into the world. Naked, I'm going to leave. The Lord gave, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, is what Job said. Contentment is not one and done. It's something we learn over time in life. It's something that's challenged within us. And we turn our eyes back to him. The writer of Hebrews says this, keep your lives free from the love of money. Be content with what you had, because God said, and here is the key, God didn't say, I'm going to make you rich or do that. God says, I'll never leave you. His presence, I'll never leave you, and I'll never forsake you. And Paul said, how did he do this? He said, well, I can do this. I can do this. I can live this life of contentment through Christ who gives me strength. So I could say, okay, there you go, leave and now go out and be content. I gave you all the information you need, so now go and be content. Well, it doesn't work that way. I continually need to be reminded. I need to be reminded of the price that was paid for me. I need to be reminded that the one who had it all left heaven and came to earth and he humbled himself and he became like a man so he could die for you and me. I need to be reminded that every good and perfect gift doesn't come from my paycheck. It comes from the Father above. I need to be reminded that Jesus, for the joy set before him, which is you and me, he gave it all up to accomplish something on our behalf. And there's lots of ways you do that, but that's when we're getting off focus, we got to go back again and be reminded of the one. Be reminded of the one who paid the debt he didn't know. We could live the life he lives. He lived on our behalf. It's from him. It's every good and perfect gift. To close, there's just a stanza from a hymn from the 1980s, the 1800s. It's a hymn. I woke up thinking about this today, and I think it's an appropriate close. And the hymn, I think I learned it in the Baptist church many years ago. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.